and you're in the back, please come on up. If not, you're welcome to stay where you're at. We'll get going in a minute or two. Okay, just for, yeah. For those of you up here at the front table, for lack of a better term, the meeting is being recorded and live streamed, so if you have comments, we please ask that the microphones move around so those that are watching or watching the recording later can hear what was said. So I guess looks like we're good. So for those that don't know me, I'm Chris Richardson, the District 1 Commissioner for Elbert County and current chair of the Board of County Commissioners. And I do thank everybody that's come out here today. We're kind of in a little bit of uncharted territory in terms of changes with Gallagher coming out of the Constitution, legislative changes, some ballot issues that'll also affect potential tax collections this year. And we're coming off of what is truly a historic increase in valuations of properties across the across the county and across the state. So we know we've got folks that are concerned about what do my taxes look like next year. And as local governments, we have our concerns about, what's the proper level of service? What do we need to be providing? How much does that cost? And, how much of, what could it cost? I'm sure you're all having discussions amongst yourselves and your boards, but if you could roll, kind of our purpose today really is just to provide a forum for discussion. Nothing is locked in stone. I mean, we're working through protests, evaluations. Again, we've got an unknown ballot measure coming up. There is obviously slight potential that there'll be other citizen initiative ballot measures this year that could also affect taxes, but right now that's not looking likely. But as I said earlier, we're all kind of balancing our need to provide the services that we were elected or appointed or participate in providing to our citizens, and how much money that takes to do that. So, but kind of the problem we're facing that rose up after the valuations went up is citizens are rightly concerned about what their tax levels are going to be next year. We got quite a few folks. We're an older county. On average, we're 10 years older than folks in the state of Colorado. We got a lot of people that retired here are on fixed incomes. So their concerns are real. You could run to the next slide. It's just kind of the agenda that we're going to follow today. I apologize up front for doing quite a bit of talking, but I just kind of want to lay the stage, and then we'll take the discussion where it goes and see if this is something we want to reconvene at or go our separate ways. But this is pretty much what we'll be following today. Next slide. So, as I said, I introduced myself earlier, but if we could go around from here and just introduce yourself, what organization you represent, whether you're a board member or a director or finance person, and then just briefly, what you hope to get out of today.
My name is Randy Meyer.
Oh, if we could, sorry. And we will pass these along as we go. Thanks.
My name is Randy Meyer. I'm with North Central Fire Protection District. I'm on the board member currently as treasurer.
Thank you.
Robert Nelson, Fire Chief, North Central Fire.
Thanks.
Aaron Harris, Deputy Chief, Kiowa Fire.
Jerry Lemansky, Kiowa Fire.
Debbie Ullum, Board of Directors, Kiowa Fire.
Terry Howard, Board of Trustees, Town of Kiowa.
Andrew Lowry, I'm with the Board of Trustees for the Town of Kiowa.
Kim Boyd, Town of Kiowa, Town Administrator.
Patrick Davidson, Town Administrator, Town of Elizabeth. Angela Turnus, Board of Trustees, Town of Elizabeth.
Dan Snowberger, Superintendent of Schools, Elizabeth School District.
Kelly Thompson, Superintendent, Elbert School District.
Grant Thayer, County Commissioner, District 3.
Dallas Schroeder, Elbert County Commissioner, District 2.
Kurt Schlegel, District Manager for several metropolitan districts here in the county.
Mike Barney with the Elizabeth Park and Recreation District.
Jane Penley, Summit Metropolitan Water Board Secretary.
Barbara Fillmore, Board Member and Treasurer, Kiowa Conservation District.
Jim White, Board President, Rattlesnake Fire.
Susan Byrne, Library Director, Pines and Plains Libraries.
Robert Thomason, Head of the Board of Trustees, Pines and Plains Library.
Kara Grzinski, Elizabeth Fire.
TJ Stack, Fire Chief, Elizabeth Fire Department.
Okay. Oh, thanks. It looks like we don't have all 51 taxing entities here today. Didn't expect that, but we've at least got representatives of just about every district type. County, towns, fire districts, school districts, metropolitan districts. So there's some separate water districts that aren't represented. I appreciate you coming representing the conservation districts. I know you guys don't have mills, but I appreciate you participating. But as I said earlier, the problem pretty much we face is the concern of our citizens. And, you know, who owns the problem? We do. The state, these are local taxes, they're local issues, there are local citizens. If we don't work to address this, the state will continue to try to fix it. They've done that several times over the years, and primarily the state's interest in local property taxes is centered on K-12 schools. Years ago, in 1994, they set a school funding formula. Essentially, operational mills were locked in all school districts at that time. Schooling has become more expensive by that formula, and the state has to backfill the schools. So that's why they operate in our space on that. In 94, when the formula was set, local government taxes paid about 70% or more of the operations of the schools. Now it's down in the high 20s. So the state is carrying what they see as the burden of paying for education and backfilling what should be local taxes. So in the state's budget, the K-12 is one of the three biggest pieces. Transportation and health human services type things are the three big tickets in the state budget. So though they like to see local property taxes rise so they don't have to bear that burden, I think even the state has seen the concern, but they're trying to fix some things that I think we can do locally. Next slide. And I know, and I apologize for most of the folks, this is old hat, but for folks in the audience who might be watching later, the three factors that determine the tax on, we'll be talking primarily residential properties today, is the actual property value is determined by the assessor, and that's essentially a market rate that is discovered based on sales. We really can't change what the true value of somebody's home is. Those sale dates, that reevaluation is done every 2 years on even numbered years as of July 30th and adjusted to that date. So that's put us in a position this year where the reassessment by statute took place at probably the height of the market, and then we've seen some things recede. So people are looking at valuations that they may feel are high compared to what they think their home is worth today. But it was a valuation that statutorily was set on June 30th of last year. But again, there's very little you can do to adjust the market as a county or an individual taxing entity. That the market is the market. The assessed value rate is set by the legislature. So that's a multiplier that reduces what the mill levies are assigned to. The Gallagher Amendment, if you recall, was repealed by a vote of the people back in 2020. Gallagher was a mechanism that was put in place in '84 to keep property values from rising too fast in comparison to the overall property tax collections. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then finally the mill rate, and that's what we certify at local boards and where we have some local control. If you could roll back up. I did want to point out again just that the one mill that really cannot be adjusted is the operational mill of the schools. And for most people's taxes, that's, if not the highest, it's one of the highest components of their tax bill, and we know those cannot be adjusted. Next slide. So collectively, this is the impact that we have on our citizens as a whole. As I said, there's 51 taxing entities. The types and quantities are listed there. They have mill levies that range from about a half a mil to almost 79 mills. The smallest one is a small water district. The largest mill is a metro district that's within the town of Elizabeth. Those, depending on where you live, comprise 118 separate taxing districts. So you may be in Rattlesnake Fire, Elizabeth Schools, a metro district, library district, the county. You might be in the town and a school district and a fire district. So all those different combinations of individual taxes equate to 118 different sets of taxes that are collected. For this year, and these numbers are pulled off of DOLA's website, so the taxes collected are about a little over $42 million. That's what we collectively take out of the local economy to fund our operations. With a median increase of about 35%, that could jump $16 million. And I think we just need to be looking very hard at ourselves as we budget how much of that is needed to provide adequate services. We all know we've been underfunded in regard to the services that we would like to provide or even should provide, but how much of an impact can our taxpayers absorb is kind of the drill we need to be looking through in my mind. So, next slide. Just in kind of background, this isn't an Elbert County only issue. The red bar is Elbert County, but across the counties, these are the median increases in residential values. Again, as reported to the Division of Taxation on the preliminary numbers. So at the bottom is Baca County at 15%. At the high end is Pitkin County at 92%. We're about 20th down the line with 44 counties having higher median increases. And it's not just big increases in the mountain towns or deep in the metro. We've got folks like Bent County down in the southeast corner that had a 65% increase. Crawley County out on the plains, 60%. Phillips County up against Kansas with a 36% increase, a little bit higher than ours. So this is statewide. Next slide. If we're drilling down to the metro area, based on our surrounding counties, we're kind of looking about right, I would say. I mean, Lincoln, I was surprised to see, saw a 28% increase. On average, or as a median increase, that's higher than what we saw on the eastern end of the county. And then as we progress across the county, they get higher and are closer to the metro large districts around them. So, and you can stop at any time if you want on these. Next slide. And then into our own county, as I said, the highest increase is kind of what you would expect up in the northwest corner. That's pushing 42.5%, and then trailing downwards to the east and south, it lowers down to the low 20s. And again, these are the median adjustments in each of those areas. So there certainly can be individuals that are much higher or much lower in each of those areas. Next slide. It's a little more discrete, broken up by zip codes. Kind of shows that same array of changes in median increases across the county, but as I said, little smaller chunks so you can kind of see where your district, if it's smaller geographically, may fit. So the small little bit of Peyton that is, I think this little red area down in here actually saw the biggest increase. Next slide. So it mentioned earlier just the Gallagher Amendment, that it passed in '84, and it was in an environment like this where housing costs were skyrocketing and people were concerned about losing their homes to taxes. At that point in time, the residential assessment rate was, I believe, 21%, and business, commercial, ag, other properties were set at 29. What Gallagher did was freeze those that were at the 29% and set those to be 55% of the total taxes collected in the state. So as time progressed and homes became more expensive, the assessment rate that was kind of the percentage of the market value of your home that's charged against your mill levy continued to drop. When Gallagher was repealed, it had worked its way down to 7.15%. And I know a lot of the issues surrounding that were then it became kind of an issue of fairness where you got businesses paying 4 times for a piece of property what a residence of the same cost would be. And I didn't agree with the appeal, or with the repeal at the time. This was after years and years of discussions of what do you replace Gallagher with? And nobody could come up with a better solution. And eventually there was just a repeal with nothing to replace it. Like a lot of public policy, Gallagher was probably the least worst answer to a problem. And that's what we generally look at, I think, around our board tables is what's the least worst thing we can do when faced with a variety of bad choices. And that's the reality of this. But the impact of that is the legislature is now free every year to set an assessment rate. They're free to make new property classes. They've started doing so over the last couple of years. They've tinkered around with formulas providing a discount from the market value before the residential rate is applied, which, you know, there's so many variations and just combinations at this point that where we used to look at every 2 years with valuations, we'd have some certainty what the following year's taxes would be. We might have a feel for what, you know, collections would look like 2 or 3 years out. That certainty is gone. Now, at a whim, the Senate or the House can introduce a bill and change those assessment rates. Right now, there's 3 that we'll be talking about in a little bit, but I just wanted to point out the numbers on these bills are sequential. You know, Senate Bill 21293, that was introduced 7 days before the end of the legislative session in 21. You know, so the 238 was about 5 days before the end of the session in 22, and 303 was in about the 5 or 6 day range from the end of the session. So there's very little time for the people that are affected to actually discuss with legislatures what the impact of their bills are going to be. So 303 kicked things out 10 years, supposedly, so there's time over a 10-year period to get it right, whatever the Gallagher replacement might be. I think the reality of it is it won't be looked at for another 9 years, or they'll be tweaking year to year in between. But, you know, all we've done is taken a big kick down the road on that. But Senate Bill 293, which will impact upcoming taxes, or actually this year, the impact of this year's taxes brought the assessment rate from 7.15 down to 3.8. And we'll talk in more detail. The 238 provides a little off-the-top reduction, and another 2.7% reduction. Prop HH provides a bigger off-the-top reduction and about a 1% reduction from what 238 did. So it's relatively minor compared to the increases we've seen. Next slide. So just kind of the timelines of where we're at. You know, there's no decisions that can be made today because there's really, we're in the midst of a very moving target. But just for those that haven't been tracking, so as you said, the valuations of our home were done, set to the date of June 30th of 22. Notices of valuation went out 1 May. The cutoff to return any protests was June 8th. Right now, I think we're tracking about 1,500, which I know is keeping the assessor busy, but at this point, it's a collaborative process. If they do a mass reappraisal, if there's something very specific to your home that it should adjust that value, then they are working with citizens through that. Just to kind of scope that a little, Douglas County's seen over 30,000 protests. El Paso's working through about 33,000 protests. So we're not the only place where people are concerned about the new valuation, and it's most people get their notices of valuation. They're not looking at the valuation, they're looking at what is the impact on my taxes. I know the governor framed it as an issue, not a problem, because look at all the equity you have. It just might cause a cash flow problem when you pay your taxes. And, I don't think most people look at it that way. So about 1,500 protests received. The assessor's working through those now. And thank you, Susan, for being here today, because I know you guys are busy. Their notices of determination on those protests will be sent out on June 30th. I believe people have, is it 10 days to, okay. And then, okay, so protests are due to the Board of Equalization by July 15th. I guess I could read my own slide. BOE will have hearing officers review, make recommendations, and the Board of County Commissioners, as the Board of Equalization, will meet by August 5th to make a final determination. At that point, notices will be sent out of what our determinations are, and then people have the opportunity, if that does not satisfy them, to go forward either to the BAA district court or enter into binding arbitration. Those are generally very, very few, so it won't affect the overall values that you're taxed on for your levying taxes for your districts on tremendously. But by August 25th, the assessor will have the preliminary valuations for the combined property values in your districts to you to start looking at. And then, as always, the statutory deadline is December 10th to have those final values in. Why they are not final well before then is kind of the rides on the state assessed properties. The state will give us an initial valuation on July 1st of the properties they assess. There's potential protest periods there. By August 1st, they'll provide final valuations. And then just in the mix of this, between August and December is the November 7th elections, and that could change dramatically how we're looking at what we apply in terms of bill levies. So next slide. So just the impacts of current legislation. It said 21-293 in effect now, expires in 2024. That lowered the assessment rate to 6.95. Senate Bill 238, which will apply to taxes that are paid next year if Proposition HH doesn't pass. But right now, with what has passed, there'd be a $15,000 reduction from the market value determined by the assessor, and then the assessment rate is dropped to 6.95. 765. That also that expires the following year in 2025. What was passed this year was something that counties pushed very hard for collectively, was clarification of our authority to float mill levies. There are many counties, Weld that has a lot of oil and gas, Logan County that's brought in quite a bit of money from wind farms, Lincoln County, our neighbor to the east, have provided mill levy reductions at times. The clear language of Tabor says that if you increase a mill levy from what it was the previous year, you have to have a vote of the people. It's been thought, not clarified by the courts because no cases have been brought against anybody that's done a temporary mill levy, but 108 was an attempt by the legislature to clarify that practice that has been used in many counties is in fact a valid practice as long as it's a temporary reduction. And that can be done every year, and as that legislation was, it's a simple 3-page bill that just clarifies that this must be done annually, and we do set our mill levies annually, they just generally haven't changed. Next slide. Okay, but what we have potentially out there, Senate Bill 303 contained a referred measure to the people of Colorado. So it's a referendum that impacts Tabor because it changes the Tabor cap. Ostensibly, it's to provide property tax relief. Within it, the first year provides a $50,000 reduction off somebody's market price and lowers the assessment rate a very small fraction, just cut off everything beyond the 0.7. And that, as I said earlier, pushes out for 10 years. But what it does do is increases the Tabor cap by 1% annually, and it provides limited backfill, and there's some handouts we can push around to districts, but it's unlikely that any of that would be available after a 2-year period. The bulk of the money that is the increases in collection goes to the state education fund to help that backfill of state education, of the backfill dollars that go to individual school districts. It does an increase of the homestead exemption, and probably the one truly good thing in this was the increase of the homestead exemption and the portability piece. So somebody that wants to downsize can actually pick up and downsize if they can find a home that's cheaper than the one they actually are in. We were hoping to get that amended into a piece of the bill that would remain even if HH does not pass, but it stays within there. It also establishes a renter's relief fund, which is kind of way outside property tax relief. And just in full disclosure, we're one of the counties that had brought suit against the state because it violates the single subject rule. Not that we don't want to see our citizens get property tax relief, but we'd like to see the legislature follow the law. There's been an initial ruling that was kind of an odd one that the district. Yeah. Okay, well. All right, no, I appreciate that, thank you. I unfortunately tend to get quiet when I think, so loud, thoughtless politicians are a dime a dozen. You got a quiet, thoughtful one, sorry. Anyway, just for full disclosure, that is something that we don't think it was properly passed. Really think it's kind of pulling the wool over the eyes of the voters. It's poorly defined, and I hope it doesn't pass, but for our purposes, what I want really doesn't matter. Next slide. Also not there was Advanced Colorado had proposed a citizens initiative that would cap collection increases at 3% a year. They have, at this point, said that they're focused on defeating Proposition HH, and they're not going to put their own ballot measure forward. But if HH passes, I think we're going to continue to see citizens initiatives in this same space because, as we'll see in a bit, HH or 293 that's in place don't do an awful lot. So this was just meant to provide a fairly generic tax bill for somebody that lives in the Elizabeth area outside the town, not in a metro district, not on 35 acres, getting an ag exemption or getting ag status and not having a homestead exemption, kind of the typical fairly new retiree that might be living in Pawnee or one of the older subdivisions that's on 5 or so acres. When their home was valued in summer of 2020, median prices were around this 483.07. The increases in the market for the valuation that was completed in 2022 will push that up to about 650,000. And so that's the median increase. That 35.33 was the median increase for that tax area 100 that we showed earlier. Currently in that area, they're paying 79.917 mills. And that's to the county, to the school district, the fire district, to the library, to Parks and Rec. There might be another one in there I'm leaving out. And the mill levy override for the schools, and there's some estimates in here. I think the mill levy override for Elizabeth schools was capped at 1.2 million in collections, so as values go up, the mill for that does drop a bit, and that's reflected. So for 2023, so that's under the bill that brought the assessment rate down to 6.95. That would take the 480 value that they were looking at times that. The mills were applied to about $33,400 or so. That mill levy results in a tax payment in their current bill this year of $2,600 plus. Next slide. Then things start getting crazy. So that first line, as you go across, your tax bill received in 2023 on an actual value of 480,000. There's no discounts off value in this year, so the adjusted value is the same as the actual value that was determined. The assessment rate was 6.95. The assessed value of 32,000 plus on that mill rate of 79.917. That's the numbers we just walked through on the last slide. Now, coming up next year, there's two things that could happen. 303 or Proposition HH could pass, or it could fail. If it were to fail, the Senate bill from 22 would come into effect and give you your home value has now gone up to 650,000. The bill that's in effect from 23 would take 15,000 off the top, so your assessment rate's being applied to a discounted $635,000. Slightly lower assessment rate, but your assessed value still goes up by $10,000. The mill rate drops a tiny bit, and that's just an estimate of where the school's mill levy override would go on this, resulting in taxes of about $3,400 or an increase of 26.4% year over year. And that's what our taxpayers are concerned about, is are the services they're going to get reflective of over a 25% increase in their taxes. Same year, if Prop HH passes, the numbers are similar, but you get a $50,000 discount, so your market rate that it's being based on is now $600,000. The assessment rate's slightly lower, so you see about an $8,000 increase versus $10,000 in the assessed value. Again, in this case, since the assessed value is a little bit lower, to collect the same for the school mill levy override, the mill rate goes up slightly, but again, you're still seeing a 19% increase with HH passing. And again, it's kind of the same question. Nearly 20% increase in taxes. Am I going to get 20% more value out of my local taxing entities. And it's a question that should be asked. Again, if you guys could hand out, there's a couple of handouts out there that show, these show everybody, all the taxing entities, what their current mill rate is, what this year's value was, and how much they collected. There's one that walks through a very complicated mess of what backfill might look like, and I've been through it several times, and all I can say is it's not very much and it doesn't last very long. And then there's a page that walks through what 303 does for the next 10 years. Didn't carry this out 10 years because 24 will be a reassessment year. So we don't know what home values will be in 2025. We don't know what the legislature may do with assessment rates in 2025, or if there'll be discounts, if things that will expire. So projecting beyond 24 is really impossible at this point. But what I did want to kind of point out on a couple of things within Prop HH, if it passes, it does require taxing entities in a public meeting to publicly consider whether they should be collecting more than the previous year's inflation. It doesn't say you can't, but it does say that if you are considering more, you have to do it in a public meeting. It's very weird language because everything we do surrounding these issues is done in public meetings and public hearings. So, but that's kind of the expectation that HH sets up, that every year your taxes shouldn't go up more than inflation, or if they do, your taxing entity should be making the case as to why. In the case that was looked here, the 2024 tax collections, if they were brought down from the 78 to 79 mills collectively down to about 74 mills, that would be about an 8% increase, which would be what the inflationary cost was. It's not an ask, this is just kind of what the numbers show. We know the schools can't impact their operational mill at all, but these are the kind of the numbers that walk through this. Next slide. Okay, so depending on what your district is and how it's comprised, we could all be looking at a potential to collect 20 to 50% additional taxes over this year going into 24. That might not be in every district, and I don't know where those lie. We'll be able to see those numbers a lot more clearly in July when we get the kind of final preliminary numbers of all the taxable property within each district. But those numbers lead to a potential cumulative collection of 57 million versus the 43 million that we're collecting now. So, I mean, if we're looking at a potential of 15 million more coming out of our local economy, what does that do to us? What can we do with that if we choose to collect that? Again, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of Prop HH. If it passes, if it doesn't, how much is backfilled? In next year's, if HH doesn't pass, there is a backfill of about 90% of what that adjustment makes. So that also changes our numbers a little bit. HH, if it passes, eventually the backfill disappears. We have a requirement to have our draft budget done by the 15th of October and available for inspection. We're not going to know until November 7th whether HH passes. So there's some other language in 303 that allows us to issue our budget to the state at the end of January, which is nice to give us more time, but our appropriations end at the end of December. So there's some things legally to, I mean, I can't imagine a continuing resolution at the school district level or at a town level like they do at the federal level regularly. But I guess the bottom line on this one is that For years and years, we've relied on the restrictions of Tabor and the adjustments from Gallagher to keep us hungry. I mean, the growth in government has been kept down by those two. With Gallagher gone, it changes the dynamic we're working in. Where we were always trying to figure out what our needs were and trying to figure out how to fund them, we potentially are in a position where revenues could actually be above what our actual needs are. So I think it just puts us in the drill of having to budget to our requirements and then using the tool that 108 provided to reduce collections if it makes sense for the district that we serve to do so. But as I said up front, these are local taxes, it's a local issue, and we've got to look at it locally because the state solutions have always been clumsy, last minute, and they really have consequences that nobody can well, actually, there's some consequences that people very clearly foresaw, but the way these bills are generally rushed through, they leave us to kind of pick up the pieces locally. So this meeting was an effort to just start this discussion and see if at the local level we can start taking back a little bit of the control we have over the services that we do provide to our folks. Next slide. So kind of, we can go around the room after this, just what your thoughts are, what your concerns might be. But, you know, to me, we've got to be communicating this to our citizens. I'm glad we had quite a few folks show up today. Communication with each other as taxing entities. If, like I said, we know schools can't change if we got somebody that's sitting on, I mean, I'm not singling out anybody, and we're one of those governments that is sitting on large fund balances. We work very hard to build them from zero to be able to respond to rainy days. We've had those, but we have to decide whether do we eat into fund balance, do we not grow our fund balances as quickly, you know, what's the right answer for providing services and meeting the needs of our citizens, and then do we want to do something like this again once we actually have our numbers in July? Actually did want to recognize Commissioner Eric Stone from Teller County, who was sitting in the back. I did go to a similar presentation like this out in Custer County a couple of weeks ago, so I know there's discussions like this happening everywhere. But next slide. So thank you. At this point, I'd just like to kind of go around the room. I mean, it said at the county level, we've had kind of the, you know, discussions of this at our conference. We do recognize that there's a potential to collect more than we need. For the county, property taxes are a big piece of our revenue, but it's only about a third of our total revenue. So there's probably room for adjustments, and we've been talking over the development of our budget for the last couple of years as our fund balances have become healthy. You know, 6+ years ago when Grant and I came into office, we had very little money in the bank. Commissioner Slagle, I know and Commissioner Rowland, I know when you came in, I believe we had about 3 hours of money in the bank in the general fund. You know, our first real effort was to build up just enough to have cash flow from year to year, and we targeted 25%. We built that. When the wind farms came in out east, we took the majority of that check and established a stability fund and contingency fund so we could react to things like the recent rains. I mean, right now, Road and Bridge is looking at $500,000 to $1 million worth of repair work. We have that money. It's not going to impact projects that are planned or maintenance once they can get away from those projects out in front. The stability fund was larger, and that was meant to carry us through a period of recession like we had seen after the last residential bubble burst. That operating 4 days a week, our reaction can't be we'll just operate 3 days a week. We have to provide services. So we know where we're sitting, and we can we can make a move, and we don't likely need to collect everything that might be available to us. But we don't know what those numbers are until we get preliminary numbers and we see what happens with legislation. So kind of with that, I'd just open it up to the room to the table, actually.
I just want to thank the commissioners and staff for putting this together. I think it's good to have the communication between all the taxing districts and the residents. If ever before, the old adage of elections have consequences, we're seeing that right now. The goal is that you won't own anything and you'll be happy about it because it's going to price everybody out of the market. I'm on a Metro Board district, and I also represent several metropolitan districts and water districts in the county. We've had those discussions already based on what we've seen so far, and we are considering temporary mill levy reductions so that we don't price our residents out of their homes. We know what our debt service is, and so we can plan accordingly for that. No decisions have been made. Again, we have to wait and see what happens. But I anticipate that most, if not all, the districts I represent will be doing those temporary mill levy reductions. And I'd encourage, if we can keep these meetings up or see what's going on as legislation moves forward and as we get closer to November election, that'd be awesome.
Thank you. Mike, anything on Parks and Rec side? Or, I mean, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. This was meant to be informational. You know, a little bit of sharing. You can have the sharing stick if you want it. If not,
sure. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly challenging for us. I mean, our mill levy is fairly small at 2.466. So I mean, it's you know, and we're in a tough situation where we feel like there's a higher demand for us to provide more services, and we don't always have the financial resources to meet all the requests and the needs that we're trying to manage or that we're receiving. So, but I know our board's certainly going to have some discussion, and they started that a little bit last night, a little bit of discussion. So we'll continue to look and see as those numbers come in July, and as we prepare our budget for next year, certainly see what is going to be possible for us to do.
Thanks. And on the town side, again, I'm going to call out, and you can tell me to shut up if you want. But I know towns generally live on sales taxes, not property taxes. But I know money is dear to everyone. Is this?
Get the microphone going. You know, we've had some very high-level internal conversations as to what, when the commissioners first put out the information in the meeting. And so we're not really in a spot yet to know quite where we stand. I mean, we're 5 months into the year, and, you know, for budget purposes.
Entirely fair.
But, it's clearly something that we are paying close attention to, and we're going to have to go back and look and see what our budget's starting to reflect. And as you know, we've had a recent referendum election that may have a change in what our taxing ability is as far as future development in the community. So those are all factors that we're kind of trying to weigh right now, knowing that there is still citizens coming in that are requesting additional services that are above and beyond what traditionally municipalities in this part of the state have requested. And so we're kind of at that just 30,000 foot view right now, but clearly we've got to look at it for our citizens' sake as well.
Yeah, I know all of these issues are really hyper-local. I mean, if you look at somebody who owns a house out near Agate, where they're really just paying Agate schools, county taxes, and library, you know, their mill rate's about in the low 40s, mid-40s. At the higher end, if you're sitting in a newer metro district, newer subdivision, in the Douglas County School District, which is about a 40 mil, you know, these can be huge impacts on some people. The actual monetary difference in Agate might still be a 20% increase, but it's a very small number. But again, when it gets to the individual taxpayer, that very small number may still be a struggle. On the school district side, any of the school districts, are there any thoughts? I know your mill is locked, so one of the things we've looked at for a lot of people is that is probably the biggest mill. If that one doesn't change, then if everybody else drops theirs to collect only what they collected this year, there's probably still an increase in taxes coming down. So there's a collective solution, but if we want to address it on the fire side, I know you guys have struggled revenue-wise for years. I mean, probably the first discussion TJ and I ever had was over what Gallagher was going to do to him back in 2013 or 14. And as I say, I know we have an aging population, and your calls for services are up tremendously. So, you know, it's one of those things where I know you need more resources to do what you're asking to do. So, I mean, none of this is meant to.
Appreciate it, Commissioner. I'm struggling with this one. First of all, on the collaboration side, we need to do better. The way I found out about your open letter to the citizens was on social media. We need to collaborate and include stakeholders in these decisions before we send that out, because that put us in a bad position. We are taking a different stance on this. We know that this is an increase in revenue for us. Unfortunately, we don't know what that's going to be yet. We don't know whether that will be 8%, 20%, or 37%, and for the same reasons you've painted for the citizens. What we plan to do is focus on increasing our services. If indeed there are increases in revenue, we're going to increase our services. As you just mentioned, we have are almost on the tail end of experiencing a 75% increase in Medicare users in Elbert County. What that means is people are retiring here, they're not leaving, they're staying here. 30-year, 40-year citizens are getting to the age where they need services more than ever, and we're experiencing that. We have a need to add a third paramedic ambulance full-time, 24/7 to our staff and to our crews, and that's exactly what we would be doing with the increase in funds. I normally completely support leaving politics at a local level when we can. But unfortunately for fire protection districts, it can't be a local issue. If everybody that's not aware of this, under Title 32 in the Special District Act, legislatively, fire protection districts are the only Title 32 district that can look for no other revenue other than property tax revenue. That is our only choice. And every year since Gallagher was starting, and I've met with Senator Gallagher many times about his intent on that bill, and it wasn't to do what it's done to the fire districts, but we have no other means of revenue. We are constantly affected by the battle that goes on at the state and county levels with property tax values. We can't collect voter-approved sales tax. We are limited to only collecting basically two fees, either ambulance transport fees or some ancillary inspection and hazardous materials fees. That's it. So when property taxes are affected every year, every fire protection district in this room and across the state are going, here we go again. We have to figure out how to do more with less. Our service demands go up. Our citizens are aging. They're requiring our services more, but the revenue continues to drop. So we have to fix that at a state level. So that isn't a local level. We could make it a local level, but what that means for fire protection districts is we're going to be asking our citizens for more money every year. We have to figure out how to get creative on revenue. I'm going to give you an example for this that makes all of us so very upset about this, but if you consider I-70 and the Agate Fire Protection, I don't think they're represented here today. Agate Fire Protection District, the majority of their calls are on the I-70 corridor. Crashes and fires and medical emergencies that occur on the I-70 corridor. None of those people that are using those services are paying the taxes. The citizens of the Agate Fire Protection District are subsidizing the service for those I-70 users. So the Fire Protection District in Agate can't use sales tax when they stop somewhere to get fuel, or they can't utilize any additional revenue to do that. So it's unfair to the citizens. We have to educate our citizens on this stuff, and that's one of our biggest limiting problems right now. We have to figure out how to fix it on a state level first, so that we can use our local control and local politics to do it. I love local control, but only when we're able to control it locally. And if we can't figure out how to control it locally, then shame on us. I want to go back to one of your slides because it was clear and I don't recall the slide number, but under HH, the governor's office that we argued with for hours on the phone promised us that we would see backfill. The fire districts would be priority. In fact, they gave us a promise that we would see priority on that. And then when this bill came out, they said, oh, only the agencies that have less than 20% increase in revenue will get backfill. Well, there isn't an agency in Elbert County, and I only counted 2 agencies on your list in Lincoln County that might possibly get that backfill.
And that 20% keeps rolling, so if in the next assessment year, that's why we're saying we anticipated, and thank you for the specific point, because really don't see backfill remaining after about a 2-year period for anyone.
I actually don't see it at all for Elbert County. And I don't want to paint a terrible picture, but what the fire protection districts are doing right now is figuring out yet again how to do more with less. So the thought, my district, and I've spoken with my elected officials at length at this, my district is really struggling with how we would be able to lower a mill levy and continue to provide services or continue to increase services that are necessary. And that's what we're dealing with right now. Now, Elizabeth's been lucky, and I'll let Kiowa or Rattlesnake speak. Elizabeth's been lucky. Our increase in call load over the last 2 years has only been 18 to 22%. The Rattlesnake Fire and Kiowa Fire districts are 40% increase in call demands. We've got a problem, and it's an unfortunate component that my taxes went up $900 per year this year. I don't know what everybody else's has gone up, but the fact of the matter is we fully plan, and I think all the fire districts are planning to utilize those revenues if they ever appear, to increase the services to the citizens, because that's what we are. We're service oriented. Increase our availability, increase our ability to go help our citizens when they don't need an ambulance, but they just need help getting lifted back up into their bed when they fell. We're seeing, that's what we're going to see, and we're trying to get ready for that. So I'm all about the collaboration. I'm all about the inclusion of stakeholders in this. But I think we owe it to our citizens to look at this revenue and not only see what we can do to limit it, but also promise them that we will use it efficiently if it is going to happen, to use it efficiently to provide the services that are necessary.
No, I appreciate all of that, and I think it affects all of you. I mean, we have school districts statutorily can't do anything. If practically that is not something that can be considered, that's good to know. I mean, we owe some, if we can't, if nothing else, it's the certainty. I mean, again, everybody opened a notice evaluation, me included, thinking, hey, that's going to hurt. But I think it's incumbent on all of us in all of our public meetings just to relay what our needs are and how they're covered. I mean, there's things that obviously, I would love to say that the 1% sales tax fixed the roads in the county. It has not fixed the roads in the county. We know that. In terms of joining forces amongst all the, whether CCI, Special Districts Association, and others, to try to work that battle for additional funding streams. I know you worked very hard just on your ability to do impact fees several years ago, many years ago now,
we were promised an opportunity in the next legislative session to float a bill to look at this and figure out how fire protection districts could look at other options. One of the options that I'm really interested in is a very small increase in state sales tax that would charge sales tax to the people that are not living in this state, that are using the services, the ski people that are getting hurt, the people that are driving on I-70 every day that are crashing their cars or falling asleep at the wheel, and they're not paying a lick of taxes for emergency services. They're relying on all of us to subsidize that, and that has to happen at a state level. That's not a local issue.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, this is definitely one over the world, and every entity's situation is different. And so, other fire districts, other district types.
Yep, Jim White, Rattlesnake Fire. Chris, mostly I couldn't hear you, but I think I got the gist of what you said. Echo everything TJ said with regard to the difficulty of funding services by fire districts. In Rattlesnake, we are, over the next few years, since we're right in the smack dab middle of where the majority of the growth in the county is occurring between us and Elizabeth, we are anticipating having to build 2 fire stations, put trucks in them, incur the operational costs of all that, probably double our staff in the next 10 years or so. Those are all significant, very significant expenses. I think you mentioned impact fees just a minute ago. The result of the growth is that our impact fee collection goes down because there are more people, and that's fine. That's the way it should work. With regard to what we're going to do, I have no idea. I haven't seen any of the numbers. I haven't been able to even approach putting a budget together yet. So in that regard, it's very premature for us to think about what we might or might not do. I do have a question for the county, though. Has there been any discussion in the vein of increasing services to opening the county on Fridays again so that the citizens have another day of the week to access county services?
We've looked at that every year in budget development since I've been here, and we will continue to. I'm not sure if that was supposed to be a gotcha, but yeah, we look at it every year. Anyone else? Yeah. Thanks, Chief.
Just to echo Chief Steck, it's hard to, we're trying to figure out how to maintain services now.
Yeah.
My 12 years as chief here at Kiowa, our call volume has gone up 297%, which is a huge hit for our department. And so to think about getting our revenue cut is scary because we just don't know what to do now.
Okay.
But 297% in 12 years for just the Kiowa Fire Protection District.
Okay. And it may sound trite, and I'm not disputing you, but again, what we're looking at is a decrease in the increase, not cutting. And I know everybody's position is different, but I know we all very dearly hold the responsibility we have to provide services. But we also can't look at this as if it's money we should have because it's owed to us. I mean, the discussion here is tremendous because, you know, being able to articulate that need, and I know you do it all the time, but we need to be articulating the need and the use of the funds that we're getting, and to ourselves as well as our citizens. And if the money is needed in order to provide what they want or deserve, then that's part of the calculation. So, Debbie?
Chris, I'd just like to add that as we're trying to figure out these budgets, obviously waiting till November for an election really puts a crunch on everybody.
Yeah.
On top of the fact that I've been very vocal about it, I mean, we're looking at an addition of possibly 4,000 homes in our fire district, and it absolutely will not pay its own way. There is no way. And our citizens in Kiowa deserve 24/7 coverage. And there's just, if we lower, which our mill levy is one of the lowest for Kiowa Fire, operating on a shoestring, I'm not sure that we could keep our doors open without all the grants that they chase. So I just want to reiterate that, you know, we are trying to operate on a shoestring, and to go backwards just really would be very painful at this point. We want to increase our service and give them what they need, because as we try to respond for North Central and Elbert, then that leaves our district completely unmanned. And to be honest, that also means that our chief and our assistant chief are only 24/7. So I really want you guys to think about that and kind of know that we appreciate coming to the table, but I'm just not sure where we can give.
Okay. No, and again, very fair. The one thing that has kind of kept me up at night is we know the numbers aren't solid. We know citizens are concerned. We know that those of us that provide services are concerned. And we're facing a vote in November that could be looked at as a lifeline. It really doesn't do too much to help the citizens either, but you know, if there's some comfort level across the county that everybody is looking at this, that we aren't looking at just taking the money because it's there, and I apologize if that sounds negative, but I don't want to see a short-sighted vote made in November that fixes everything that doesn't fix anything. So we have to stay engaged. And like I said, the discussion here is, I think, tremendous. Because every one of us and every different government type does face, and every government type in each location faces a different set of circumstances. And as I said, it's very hyper-local. We've just got to be, and I'm not saying that we don't all work on it together, but I'm not sure if, you know, or we don't work on it individually in our own boardrooms. But I do think that the citizens don't see that to the level that it is happening. So if this helps that, that's great. If it doesn't help, that's great too. I do think there's value in coming together again once we actually have our preliminary values in July, just so we know kind of we're in a much better ballpark of what we're looking at. So, you know, we may be able to come to the table with something we can do. Oh, August 25th. Okay, sorry. So we can push off until August. Kurt?
You know, it's very evident that one size doesn't fit all, and I think we all realize that, depending on the entity that we represent. The one thing that I would request or encourage is HH is a joke, and what they're trying to do is entice people to vote for HH by saying it's going to be a tax cut, and in the long run, it's going to be a tax increase. And so I think it's incumbent upon us, who are elected officials or who represent organizations, to take a stand on that ballot measure, whether you support it or not. But we need to educate people, because that's why we lost Gallagher, is because folks thought they were going to reap the benefits of that, and now we're not. And the next goal for the legislature is to get rid of Tabor, this is a stepping stone to it. And so we need to be very vocal about it, and we need to educate people, because I talk to people where I live and people I run into every day, and I can tell you that probably 9 out of 10 don't have a clue as to what's going on at the state level. And all they're going to see on that ballot is a tax break, and they're going to vote for it.
So, ma'am?
So I'm Susan Byrne from the Library District again, and I just wanted to offer something very practical that we've been discussing. I don't know if it would help you all as districts, and you've probably already thought of this, but we're going to do at least 2 and maybe 3 scenarios for our budget, because there's just no other way to do it. We have to have the budget prepared, so you know, we'll do it as if HH passes, we'll do it as if HH doesn't pass, just so that we're prepared, and just run those numbers so that we've got an idea of what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to. I mean, if we don't know what the answer, I mean, we can certainly look at determining requirements and then potential, what can we do with a little more money? What can we do with a little less money? I mean, kind of change packages. I mean, I guess there's a lot of ways to attack it, but bottom line is we will not know on October 15th what our full budget looks like because we won't know what the revenue side is. We can earmark it. I mean, we can assume nothing passes and 108 provides a mechanism to do some adjustment if adjustment is needed. But where that revenue comes from or how it comes to us is going to be unknown until after November. Yes?
Yeah, I'm Robert Nelson, Chief of North Central Fire. So we are one of the smallest fire districts in the county, and we're very rural, and we're a predominantly lower income area. I don't know what the answer is, but I know the way it was handled, that this information went out to the public prior to it coming to the fire departments, really put us in a position. I've had citizens asking me if we're going to lower our mills because their perception is that they're going to save a lot of money if we do that. The reality is they're not. And it puts us in a real pinch to, represent our department well. By saying, we operate on $47,000 a year. I don't know what the answer is in terms of how to reach out to these entities, but, having the public find out before I found out was a real kick in the shorts.
Okay. And for that, I'll apologize. We were getting lots of, what are you going to do? Oh, this is what we're going to do. Again, we know schools can adjust. It appears fire districts, statutorily schools can adjust. It appears practically fire districts can't. That starts helping us fill in the picture of what is available to everybody collectively. So, there was no intent to put anybody in a bad position, and it's actually completely understandable that any taxpayer would ask, what are you doing with my money? How much do you need? I mean, those are questions we're answering regularly. So, but the intent was not to put anybody on the spot. It was to say, hey, this is what we've been hearing. This is what we as a county are going to try to do. Yes, ma'am.
I would just say as a reminder, you keep talking about school districts can't do anything. We're in a 2-year of a 4-year process where we're required to increase our mill levies.
Okay.
And we've got to reach 28 mills
Okay.
in those districts that aren't there. Elbert won't ever get there in this 4-year process, but you guys are looking at decreasing your mills and we're required to increase. So it's going to kind of put us against each other when it looks like you're giving into the citizens and school districts are taking again. So just want you to just have that reminder that we're kind of stuck in this hard place.
And thank you for that.
And we all never have enough money. Elbert County is a great place to live, but we also neighbor Douglas County. And as you look at school districts, Douglas County raised their base teacher salary to $56,000 this year. I believe the base for teacher salaries in Elbert County is around $40,000. It's pretty hard to compete with our neighbors. So looking like we want to decrease our taxes, it's going to hurt our citizens too. And I appreciate everyone coming to the table and working together and all of us brainstorming. I think Elbert County has some amazing people in this county, and I think if we put our brains and our heads together, we can do what's right for our county. And I appreciate this meeting. Thanks.
I appreciate that. And I guess, second, Robert, but just to Kurt's point, I think the best thing that comes out of all this is a better understanding by the public about how all this works and where the money goes. And just because we collect it doesn't mean we use it as the county. That I think that honestly is the best answer to all of this, is a populace that actually understands how their government works for them and what the impacts of all of this was. Mr. Rowland? Yeah.
First responders, I think there's a lot going on here. And you
talk about communication, and the meeting's good, and all the entities from the taxing entities are here.
Robert.
But it's very difficult, as we all know, I'm sorry, excuse me. It's very difficult, as we all know, to communicate and to get effective messages out to the citizens. And it's not by anybody's fault. We don't have a radio station, we don't have a newspaper per se. And I think we need to have a lot of discussions about a lot of this. It's the increase in property values clearly is an issue that the citizens are focused on. But when you talk about educating people about this HH and the danger, and Mr. Schlegel is absolutely correct. It's they offer a carrot to get something else. And we've fallen for that before and are likely to fall for it again if we don't effectively communicate to at least our citizens on what the potential of that is. I'd like to... Am I being cut off or battery out? But we need, seriously, I think, to look at it scares me when I hear the chief talking about, the increase in the rooftops, the increase in the age of this community, the needs of our emergency services, and the declining ability to respond to those things. That is as basic as it gets. And we need to look at the whole picture, and all of us need to do a good job of finding out how to communicate to our citizens, our neighbors, and letting them know that there's a lot going on, and we need a comprehensive approach to all of this, I think. And I applaud you all for doing what you're doing, but let's get the word out and get our citizens educated as best we can. Thank you.
Thanks. If we could have the... Thank you. And Dallas or Grant, I know I'm the one in the spotlight, but if there's things you'd like to add, you've seen it from a different perspective than I have.
Let's not look at this as necessarily a problem. Let's look at this as an opportunity to communicate with our citizens. And if we have needs and put them out there, people will respond to that. So let's see it as an opportunity to do more outreach with our citizens. I think that helps a lot. Have that full transparency. They know exactly where we are. Perhaps sometimes we have the temptation to kind of say everything's great when we're trying to, at the back end, we got problems. But we need to be fully transparent and say, we have so many calls, we need help. But let's take this as an opportunity, not necessarily just look at it as a problem.
I think we need to look at this as the Romans did. If you poison the well, you can't go back to drink. Let's figure out what the impact of each and every one of these items are. And from my understanding of this proposition, HH right now, it could be poisoned water. I don't know exactly what it's going to do to the public or to the fire department. Each and every department is important to us, and we want to make sure that the three of us are there to provide opportunities for you to provide the services that you are asked to do. Let's keep in communication, and as we talk to each other and evaluate portfolios of numbers, we'll be able to analyze this in a way that will be the best that we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll send those out to everybody. I had hoped to get them out before, but we had rain and other things that delayed getting all the numbers together. So I do want to thank everybody for showing up today. I do hope this was helpful. I know it was for me because it brought up, some, issues that I was aware of, but not the full impacts of them. So it's, I think, best that we keep in communication and we won't announce a meeting before we check with people to see if they're available. But if August is the right time to have the preliminary figures together and have a chance for boards to have looked at them, I do think it's very important that our citizens know what our intents are as boards prior to the November election so they can make a decision based on what's before them and what, you know, anything could happen, or this could provide certainty, even if it's bad, becomes that least worst option being provided to the voters, which I think is very unfair to them. So, ma'am?
I would just ask maybe what our next steps might be. With school kicking off in early August, that's a great time to get information out to parents, and that's probably the best way to communicate. So possibly another meeting prior to that start of school, because we're going to be having back-to-school nights and things like that. If we have some information for our citizens, that's probably the best way to get it out. But I don't want to send out a message at the last second. I'd much rather sit down and be prepared as to what I'm going to be talking about when parents are coming and hitting me about it and asking what they should be doing, whether supporting or against it. So.
Thank you for that. Yeah. All righty. Well, thank you very much. And we'll get, if we've got all your contact information, and we'll send this out to everybody that was here and everybody that had been invited. So thank you. Thanks.